Hello students, welcome to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. I am Dr. Sonal Mobar Roy and today we will be looking at the course Social Issues, Policies and Development. We will focus on block 5 which talks about contemporary concerns related to social and human development. We are studying unit 13 today, wherein the whole idea is to understand social exclusion and inclusion, and now we will be talking about social inclusion. This course is part of Sociology UG second year, semester 3. So, in the previous segment, we have already seen what are the factors related to social exclusion, how do we define social exclusion, who are the social categories that are affected by social exclusion. In this segment, we will be trying to understand the whole idea of social inclusion, and as students of sociology, it is imperative for you to understand in depth what are the factors that lead to social inclusion, what is the meaning and concept of social inclusion, and how can we propagate the same. So, coming to the meaning of social inclusion aims to improve opportunities, dignity, participation and access to resources for disadvantaged groups. Now, which are the groups that are called or labeled as disadvantaged? These are the SCs, STs, OBCs, minorities and the differently abled in the country. When we are talking about their inclusive participation, we have to ensure people at risk of poverty and exclusion can participate fully in economic, social, political and cultural life. They have the access to these platforms for better quality of life. When we are talking to the response to social inclusion removes barriers and promotes equality, rights, voice and participation in society. We will be taking a look at this in detail in the coming slides. What are the groups that are excluded in India as per the so-called label of disadvantaged? These incorporate Dalits, the Adivasis, the OBCs, the minorities, women, refugees, the poor, the poorest of the poor, the landless labor, the person with different abilities are the major excluded groups in the country. And when we say excluded, they are excluded from the access to education, health, banking facilities and so on. So, what are the key points or key factors that we need to understand about social inclusion in India? So, T.K. Oman, one of our renowned sociologists, identifies groups such as Dalit, Adivasis, OBCs, minorities, women's, refugees, poor and persons with differently abled abilities as socially, politically and economically excluded from the mainstream society. The state is the main agency responsible for creating and protecting rights, though implementation of welfare policy often remains weak. So, in reality, we see the government has come a long way designing policy frameworks, coming with interventions which focus on certain gaps that are due to social exclusion and marginalization of these particular categories. But we are not able to completely justify their delivery. So, there are certain gaps in reality, there are power dynamics, there are diverse issues related to culture, language, geographical issues, all these impact the smooth implementation of the government programs. So, role of the state is quite important and crucial when it comes to bridging the gaps related to social exclusion. Then according to women, there is a step for according to women, the steps for an inclusive society are there to promote cultural diversity, political pluralism, federalism and dismantling of caste hierarchy. Though he has proposed such strong hits for breaking the whole structure, the social structure that leads to social exclusion, in reality we see it is quite a challenging task to implement these. You cannot have dismantling of the caste hierarchy in a day or in a snap. It is a long drawn process and it may have other impacts as well. So, as a student of sociology, you should understand that there are certain root causes of social exclusion, of people being marginalized, but then what are the issues or gaps that we can address and smoothen the whole process and make sure people have good quality of life. When we say good quality of life, the whole idea is to promote human and social development by reducing exclusion and inequality. If we are talking about correcting exclusion, inclusion policies address disadvantages based on gender, age, ethnicity, disability, education, health and economic status. Nobody should be ridiculed or devoid of his or her rights just because of his or her gender, age, ethnic group, or because they are differently abled, or because they are not well educated, or they have poor health, or they come from a weaker section of the society. Then if we are focusing on participation and rights, social inclusion ensures access to opportunities, resources, decision making and fundamental rights. So, the government has made sure that there are various programs related to health, securing good livelihoods, scholarships and funds for good education for these disadvantaged groups. Redistribution of opportunities, it focuses on equal distribution of social opportunities, so all sections can develop and contribute to society and nobody feels marginalized or on the threshold of the poverty. Lastly, the focus is on improving quality of life. Inclusion enhances economic freedom, social empowerment and overall well-being. These are certain factors that lead to the community, to the individual feeling inclusive in the whole process of development. As student of sociology, it is essential that you address structural problems. Social inclusion seeks to reduce deep-rooted inequalities such as discrimination, social exclusion, lack of representation and unequal power relations. These are strong socio-political economic factors that lead to communities and individuals being marginalized. They cannot voice their concerns on national platforms. They are unable to ask for their rights and entitlements. So, these are certain issues and gaps that need to be addressed. It also emphasizes accountability in institutions and governance so that marginalized groups gain equal access to opportunities, resources, rights and participation in development process. So, if we are talking about development process, we have to ensure that all these marginalized sections have equal rights and equal entitlements. They have a equal platform to stand and voice their concern. They are not shied away or they are not ridiculed for coming forth and talking about their issues at a larger or broader level. So, as a student of sociology, it brings us to certain critical reflections. Exclusion is structural, not individual. Social exclusion is often rooted in caste, class, gender, ethnicity, disability and unequal power relations rather than an individual failure. So, one should understand a broader perspective of how social exclusion takes place. Then inclusion is beyond welfare. Social inclusion is not only about providing benefits but also ensuring dignity, participation, representation and equal opportunities. As a student of sociology, you should focus on one's dignity, their participation. You should see that people from these sections are empowered enough, they have good capabilities and skills, they are acknowledged. The whole point of this whole idea of exclusion and inclusion is that they are acknowledged, they are not shooed away for or ridiculed away for their language or gender or because they come from certain ethnic background. Then when we are talking about policy versus reality, despite constitutional safeguards and welfare programs, there exist gaps in implementation and continue to limit meaningful inclusion. So, we have to focus on that. There is a long road right now to take and then we have to work on this. Then if we are talking about participation and voice matter, true inclusion requires that marginalized groups participate in decision making and development process, not merely remain beneficiaries. So, they have to step up now and talk about their issues at a national level with a more strengthened voice. So, sociology helps us critically examine how institutions, policies and social structures reproduce inequality and shape inclusion or exclusion. Some of the questions that I leave you with are to talk about: can development be considered meaningful if large sections of society continue to remain excluded? Does inclusion mean equal participation? And can policies alone transform deeply rooted social hierarchies such as caste, patriarchy and discrimination? These are certain questions to ponder upon when we are engaged with sociological frameworks and come up with good ideas for producing better quality of life for these marginalized sections. Thank you.